Let me just get that over there.
Excellent. Hello, everybody in YouTube world, in Zoom world, wherever you're joining us. I'm so excited to have you here for our second episode of Cooking with the Hazzan. Hewlett-East Rockaway Jewish Center is happy to present two of our amazing congregants who happen to be sisters, beautiful, spending lots and lots of time together on holidays. Welcoming Cheryl and Jennifer. So I want to welcome you guys. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you're going to be making for us today.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here today cooking, and we are very excited for the Passover holiday coming up. So today we're not making the most traditional recipes, but we think these are two great recipes that are easy to put on your Pesach table and they satisfy a lot of different diets, and so they're really good options.
We've tried to modernize Passover a tiny bit. Our family, thank goodness, is large, and we have big gatherings, and we have all different types of eaters. I'm a meat and potatoes person. Cheryl is a meat and potatoes person, but
me too.
We have vegetarians, we have vegans, we have people who can't eat glucose, pescatarian,
celiac, we got it all.
Right.
Yeah, it runs the gamut. So not just for Pesach, but for every holiday, we find ourselves having to satisfy a lot of different appetites and diets. So this is a couple of things that we think really do the trick. And just in case anybody doesn't know us, I'm Cheryl. This is Jen.
I'm Jen.
We're sister-in-laws. We happen to live across the street from each other,
Which makes holidays super easy and fun, very fun when we've had too many glasses of wine.
Yes.
And my sister schleps now from DC to come join us for the holidays. And we do still have a bunch of the traditional foods at our table, but we try to leave that to our mothers.
Yes, thank goodness we have them, and they're still cooking for us. So we always have Jen's mom, my mother-in-law, who's wonderful, makes famous peach kugel every year, and
My Farfal kugel
would not be
and her
based
sweet and sour meatballs
without that.
Right.
Absolutely. And my mom makes our favorite matzo ball soup, and she makes her gefilte fish from hand every year by hand, chopping it all up every year. So,
And by the way, we make these things as well, but they don't compare to Aunt Linda's. So
Wow, amazing.
kudos to the elders.
yes, we couldn't do it without them. So I happen to host this holiday at my home, but everybody brings something, and Jen's across the street cooking and baking for me, and she hosts other holidays at her house. So it's all great, and we have a lot of fun with all our holidays, and our kids are all together, and we always enjoy it. And since our two families have come together, we have always had like really big holidays, and
Yes.
it's great. So
And it has changed as the kids have matured, because when they were younger, Cheryl, you still use from the nursery school.
oh yes, I had to highlight this because the Hazzan was discussing the other day how your mom still has your afikomen bag from when you were in nursery school. So
That's right.
I have to run over here and bust out a couple of things. So
I can't wait to see.
I still have every one of my children's afikomen bags from the Hewlett-East Rockaway Nursery School, and we use them every year. I never bought a real one. And we were also discussing the Passover Haggadahs. And yes, we had our old ones, and we had when our two families combined, we had my family's Haggadahs and your family's Haggadahs, and it was like
they were
mishmash.
They were dirty. You'd open them up, and there were matzah crumbs, and there was souffles from like 40 years ago in them. So we have a brand new set.
I think last year or maybe the year before, actually pre-COVID, I'm sure, I made everybody run to every Stop and Shop that they could go to and pick up, like 10 of these. So now we have a clean set, and that's what we use. And while I'm over here, I just want to mention this gorgeous Pesach candy board that Jen made, and she does have her candy business, and it's all kosher for Pesach candies.
Well, that's because we like sweets. So we talked about our different culinary tastes, how we have to please everybody. Cheryl's family tends to like plainer, more savory, if you will. My clan tends to like sweet, over the top, the more sugary, the better. Correct?
Yes. Actually, that's what brought us to our 2 recipes today.
Yes.
So one of them, we're doing a quinoa salad, which has a little bit of sweetness, which I happen to like, but it's a little bit basic, and it definitely works for our vegans and anybody who wants something a little bit healthier.
It's on the healthier side, on the lighter side.
Does not have any real sugar in it. It just has a little touch of honey and some cinnamon. And then the second item we're making is, of course, something sweet and delicious that
Loaded with sugar.
that you have to have for every single holiday.
A semi souffle, but there's not butter in this one, so I can say it's lighter, but there is a cup of sugar in it, and we can get to that afterward.
Eat a little something sweet on it.
Should we start with your delicious, sweet and crunchy quinoa salad?
We are going to start with the delicious quinoa salad. So I think the recipes were sent out. So I have preheated my oven to 400 degrees, and I actually have pre-cooked the quinoa because the recipe does actually say to let it sit covered for a few hours, which I have to tell you, I make quinoa often, and I really never do that. I always make the quinoa and just toss it all together. And this gave the quinoa a really nice texture. So I definitely recommend it. And I'm
It's interesting.
grab the quinoa over here.
Cheryl,
And
how long does it take for you to cook the quinoa
the
generally?
quinoa is very quick. It cooks in about 15 minutes. So you rinse your dry quinoa off for some reason. And I am not a chef by trade, so I'm not really sure why, but maybe it takes a little bit of the bitterness out of the I'm not going to say grain. It is not a grain. We all know that quinoa has been a staple on our Passover tables for the last few years. It is not a grain. I think it's a seed. It's actually a plant. I looked it up and tried to do a little research. It's somehow related to like the spinach and beet plant. So, not a grain, but anyway, you should rinse it first in a little strainer. You throw it in some water. It's kind of like cooking rice. You bring it to a boil, turn it down, cover it, and let it simmer for about 15 minutes, turn off the heat, and then apparently let it sit for an hour, 2 or 3. And then it comes nice and fluffy, and you use a whisk to fluff it up, which is a great little trick.
I've never let quinoa sit. So interesting.
I usually just toss the whole thing. But in any case, I thought that the texture was really nice, so I suggested. Okay. So we have the quinoa, and next we are going to roast a sweet potato. So we have 1 potato, which we are going to peel. And I don't know if this is the safest way to peel potatoes, but it is the way that I learned from my mom and my grandma. So maybe don't do this at home. Use a regular potato peeler to be safe. But in any case, we're going to cut the potato up into small little pieces, and they should be nice and bite-sized so that you're not biting into like a huge hunk of potato, because this is salad and you kind of want everything to be around the same size.
Also helps they cook up more quickly that way.
Yes, they definitely do. That's a very good point. So we'll get nice and soft after about 25 minutes. And then we throw those in with everything.
It's funny because this is our not sweet dish, but it has sweet potatoes.
It does.
So it is still
Yes.
sweet to the palate.
So I have a little disposable pan. I always give a little spritz of the olive oil spray. And throw your potatoes on. And we're gonna toss them with about a half a teaspoon or half a tablespoon maybe of some olive oil. And roast them up until they're nice and soft.
Yeah.
So, and delicious, and they get all sweet. And just like they do on the cooking shows, I already have one prepared.
You're a pro.
We need
Or
a
a sweet
drum roll.
So here are my delicious sweet potatoes. Already done
Beautiful.
and roasted. The magic of PB. Okay, next step is to place, we're gonna toast the pine nuts up a little bit. So we need 1/3 cup of pine nuts. And I've already told Jen that this is gonna be her job. Actually, can you open this?
Sure can.
There we go. I actually have a problem, and every time I toast nuts, I tend to walk away from the pan.
Oh, you can't, they burn so
And they
quickly.
burn.
Yes.
And I'm one of those people that really can't multitask while I'm cooking.
So we chit chat on the phone a lot,
So-
but not while Cheryl is cooking.
Right, because I burn every single dinner if I'm chatting. I will
Okay.
toss them in the pan.
Sure. And you want a little spray at the bottom of the pan?
No, you don't even,
Really?
you don't even need it.
Because the nuts have their natural oil?
Have some natural oil. That is such a good point. So,
Would you like a light toast on this, Cheryl?
yes, please. A light toast will do just fine. So you're definitely gonna let Jen handle that, so that does not get done. Okay, so while those nuts are toasting, we're gonna make the dressing. In a little bowl over here. So. What I really love about this quinoa dish is that I happen to think that quinoa sometimes I love it and sometimes it's like, it's okay. And I think quinoa can actually be like a little bit bitter. So I think the key to quinoa is to have a really great dressing to go on it. And this one happens to be delicious, which is why I really love it. And I think it's a great one to serve at any holiday, actually, because the dressing does have cinnamon and honey and cumin, and it's just, I don't know, there's something perfect.
We love cumin.
I love cumin.
We do.
Sometimes I think that like people think cumin and cinnamon together is a weird combo.
Oh, it's the best.
But it's really delicious. So this is 3 tablespoons of olive oil. We have apple cider vinegar, which is another vinegar that I really love in my dressings. I think it just hits like a great note.
Gives it a little depth.
Yeah, it's not too tart. So we're going with 4 teaspoons. Great. 4 teaspoons of the apple cider vinegar. And 2
Cheryl,
teaspoons of,
I have a question. Is this a dressing that you can make ahead of time and keep in the refrigerator, or is it something you suggest making at the time of
Such a
the salad?
question. And you, absolutely. I think you can, assemble a lot of the parts of this ahead of time.
And actually, it's such a good idea for entertaining because you can't do it all seamlessly if you don't do some of the stuff prior. So
Yes, and also the recipe itself is a room temperature recipe, so you can make the dressing the day before, you could probably cook the quinoa the day before and roast the potatoes, and then I probably toss the whole thing together the morning of, and it can just sit on the counter, which is great because you serve it at room temperature. And another trick, by the way, I'm going to add the honey, 2 teaspoons of honey to the recipe. And I've always had a problem measuring honey because half of it gets stuck in the spoon. So somebody had told me to give a little spritz of like an olive oil spray or any spray to your measuring utensil. And then the honey slides right out. So I love that trick.
That's a great trick.
It's fabulous. It just goes right out.
These pine nuts look like they're ready.
I smell them. So I always feel like when you start to smell the nuts, then they're ready. And that's when I know that I've usually burned mine because oh my goodness.
Well, with nuts, you have to constantly keep stirring them.
You cannot walk away from them. So, okay.
And put them in a bowl.
Here you go.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so we did honey and a quarter of a teaspoon of salt is going in and little black pepper, a quarter of a teaspoon. And then we have our cumin. And we need a half teaspoon of cumin and a half of cinnamon. You like that move where I just wiped the teaspoon out with my hands? Like it all works. It all works. Here's the cinnamon, and it actually looks like a ton when it goes in,
But it's not.
but it's not. And
And it gets absorbed by the quinoa,
yes.
so.
And I'll ask you to finish whisking that while I pull scallions. So I've got the crushed scallions here. And I'm gonna slice these up a little bit, and it calls for 4 scallions. And I to not love my things really oniony, so for me, I probably put 1 less, but if you look at it, put more.
You should put extra onions for mom on the
Right,
side.
definitely.
My mom always gets on the side, wherever we go, whatever dish it is, extra onions.
Mom Craver loves extra onions on the side of everything. Okay, and now I think we're pretty much ready to assemble. We've got our nuts, we've got our quinoa, we have our roasted sweet potatoes. So I'm gonna put this whole thing together. And hopefully
It's simple and delicious.
this things over here. Let me move things up. Okay. So let's see if we can, oops, did I just spill that all? Okay. So quinoa in the bowl. And I think we start with putting about half of the dressing in. And I know that a lot of people will say, you know, don't put the whole dressing in, see how you like it first and then add. This dressing is really so good that you want to put the whole thing in. And I think, like you said, the quinoa absorbs it.
It does,
so
so
much.
it's not water, it doesn't
So-
get watery.
I think, no, it doesn't get soggy or anything. And we're gonna now toss everything else in.
Here's your nuts.
Beautiful. Perfectly toasted. And we're gonna use some dried cranberries. And by the way, obviously, use any nut you want here. I happen to love pistachios also, and you could use almonds. You could sub the cranberries for raisins. I think anything you can really toss into this quinoa salad, and it's delicious. And I
By you
think
adding the cranberries though, it's obviously gives it the sweetness, but it gives it that color to, you know,
well, that's what I also like about it, is that it looks so pretty.
it's aesthetically pleasing.
All colors, and we like, I know Jan does too, we like our holiday buffets
To be
colorful, and you have to have like a little of everything. You have to have a green and an orange. You know, so we're a little nuts, I think, sometimes
Well,
when it comes
we're
to
a bit overboard with what
the
we
entertaining.
I
So
want you to hold it up so that they can see how
yeah, I'm gonna
pretty it
I'm
is.
now gonna add the rest of the dressing, because as I said, you definitely want it. It's a really delicious. And another great thing that you can throw in here, if you want some extra veggies, is like some baby spinach or some arugula leaves are always great. Or if you just want a little bit more color in the dish, some chopped fresh parsley, I think always goes with anything. And
Yeah.
of course is appropriate for Pesach. So we always talk about parsley on
Yes.
yes.
And that goes over well when it's passed around the table.
Yes, and so you can see
Let's see,
this,
can we do this?
but it's
Can you
really
see the
pretty.
color?
Wow, that looks amazing.
So pretty. It's so delicious. It has like a little hint of sweetness, and it's a perfect.
It's healthy, it's light,
Perfect
it
piece.
smells really good.
It does.
I've had the pleasure of tasting it, and I would give it a 10 out of 10.
So dish number one.
Delicious.
All done. And like you said, Hazzan, it is easy. You can prepare it in advance. It's served at room temperature. You don't have to stand over your oven waiting for it to heat up and stressing like I
Right.
do with a lot of the other things. Like,
Right, no, you
oh
can
my-
pre-do it.
is this roast done?
Right.
And I mean, so many incidences over the
Of
year.
course, we also have dogs, so there's been
Right.
instances where we've gone to the kosher butcher,
Spent a small fortune on a roast and
that
then
was eaten.
the dog takes it off the counter and eats it.
Yes,
Or, I remember when I got my new oven, like this weird convection oven I have down here, which is actually the coolest gadget. But the first year I was using it, it has like a thing where you set the temperature that you want the meat and how many and what time you want it to be done. And it like magically like just finishes the meat.
it knows
It
before,
knows.
yes.
But about like 30 or 40 minutes before it's ready to be done, it's the internal temperature is nowhere near what you think it should be. And I remember I started panicking one year and I was like, this thing is not cooking. And like I had to call up my mother over for an emergency consult. And then my aunt was involved and there was like, it was a whole thing. Take it out of the oven, slice it up, put it back in.
But they're always around, so it works.
It's great. Anyway, okay, so we're not on here for 6 hours. We will now move on.
Okay, we're gonna move on to
Recipe number
the,
2.
which is more of a, I'm not gonna say a traditional dish, because again, there's no margarine. So even though this is a sweeter side dish, it is not heavy, right? So, because we're trying to stick away from that. So this is called Sinis Souffle. I know you guys were forwarded the recipes already. And the first very simple step I'm going to do is simply separate the eggs. It calls for 5 separated eggs. And it's going to take me a little bit of time here because we're going to have to whip the egg whites. And I know we were talking about texture before with Cheryl's delicious, yummy quinoa salad. Well, when you whip the egg whites prior to using them in a recipe, when you whip them into stiff peaks, it really changes the texture of the recipe that you're making. So first thing I'm going to do is separate these 5 eggs. Is it easier to throw them all together? Of course. Is it quicker to throw it all together? Of course. Will it taste better if we do it properly? Whoops, one fell in, so we're gonna need an emergency spoon for that one.
Okay, should I for an egg or no?
Yeah, do you have a trick on separating the egg whites from the egg yolks?
I do it by hand. So I just crack the egg and I usually just go, like this, and the egg white comes out, and then I put the yolk into that bowl. I don't have a specific trick. You could see as many times as I've cooked, I dropped a yolk, but with a teaspoon.
You saved it. That's
Oh,
good.
yeah.
I would not have been
You
that.
can call me an egg hero if you want to.
I do have some little device that
That separates?
it sits on the edge of your bowl and it has a little, I don't know, somehow the yolk drops, no, the white drops through it and the yolk sits in the top. So there is some device you can.
Yes,
buy,
there is.
but-
I'm going to be 100% honest. All the devices that I have, and I have plenty, I find it easier
Yeah,
to do it myself often.
absolutely. And then it's just like something else that you have to clean. So
Correct.
it comes more in.
Correct. Of course, after you use cracked eggs, everybody has to wash their hands because otherwise, we don't want to contaminate anything. I'm going to start by whipping these egg whites because the egg whites need to be stiff. And while I'm doing that, Cheryl is going to start on grating the carrots that we need for this recipe. Now, I gotta tell you, and I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but I'm just going to.
We can hear
grate
you
up the
very nicely.
carrots. Okay, so I'm trying to stand close to the mic here. So the carrots, I guess most people might use a box grater or moms probably would have used a box grater many years ago, but I'm just not so good at that. And I definitely would be missing half of my fingers if I was to use a box grater. So I find the food processor to be amazing for this. And so I think the trick is to use the small shredding disc in the food processor and you get small shreds. If you're absolutely set on having the carrots more like grated texture, you can then take the shreds out of the food processor bowl, swap out the blade and put the regular blade back in, throw the shreds in and pulse them for like 5-10 seconds at the most. And then they really become grated. So I'm gonna throw these in the food processor over here.
Again, by using the food processor, we're modernizing, we're making it quicker, we're making it match our lifestyle. And I'm almost done with the egg whites. They will be able to have their heat. Now, if I was making meringues, the peaks would have to be much stiffer. Meringues is something I do make for the holiday. But for this recipe, just a little bit of peaks is necessary. Let's see. Have to do it a little bit longer.
And while you're separating
Uh-huh.
eggs for this dish, you could always separate eggs for your meringues, right? The question
What's
is,
that?
when you separate eggs for this dish, you can separate eggs for your meringues too, but do you have to
Always,
put
and those
sugar
are- I
in
know.
first?
Elliot always requests, one of Cheryl's son always requests the meringues. That's one of the desserts.
With chocolate chips.
With chocolate chips. Post it in that
Yes.
over.
Delish.
Those were always ahead.
How many people do you usually have at your table for Seder?
Well, before COVID, I would say 25,
Yeah,
25 to 30.
25 to 30. Things have certainly changed. Number one, COVID, but also,
People have gotten married.
people have gotten married and our kids are older and
Some of them are at
at
school.
school and they don't have breaks during Passover. So it has definitely gotten substantially smaller in the last few years, but we all know that's how the life cycle goes. And hopefully soon they're going to be bringing home their partners or their spouses, and God willing, we'll have grandchildren at our table.
Hopefully. This recipe calls for a 9x9 square dish. I want you to know I'm making it in that today, but truth be told, when I make it for the holiday, and I'll show you that one after because I made one yesterday, I use a fancier oven to table dish. I wanted to follow the recipe today, so I'm using what it called for. And prior to putting anything into the 9x9 Pyrex, I have preheated the oven to 350. And at this point, my egg whites are ready to go. Cheryl is helping me grate the carrots.
The carrots are shredded.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Cheryl, may I have a large bowl to put everything in? Okay. So the reason yes, that's great. The reason I asked for a separate bowl is that you are supposed to fold the carrots into, let me grab a spatula, let me just wipe this off.
I put one in your carrots.
Ooh, it's in my carrots ready.
It's ready to go.
Ready to go. You're supposed to fold the carrots into the eggs. So I didn't want to just put the egg whites into the carrots, right? You don't want to overmix here, or it will defeat the purpose of mixing the egg whites, right? By us mixing the egg whites, we're going for a lighter texture. I am going to be adding a cup of sugar. I know I said that before. So when I say lighter, we're talking about how it tastes and texture, not necessarily lighter in terms of calories. So we're folding, right? Not mixing.
We expect calories on the holidays.
Well, this is a holiday that you do not want to go on the scale immediately after.
Oh boy, certainly not.
Right. So we,
My matzah with cream cheese and jelly, that's one of my favorites.
oh, and the Passover desserts.
Passover desserts.
So we're mixing the carrots, which Cheryl did such a beautiful job of shredding.
Thank you.
And I'm folding them carefully. And let's follow the recipe. The next thing we're going to put in is my famous cup of sugar.
It's your.
Thank you so much. One thing about cooking, if you're off a smidgen, with baking, it is super important. With cooking, if you're off a smidgen, it's okay.
Little extra
A
sugar,
little extra sugar.
little extra matzah. Never hurt anyone.
So very simply, we folded in the carrots. We're folding in the sugar. Our next thing that we need to fold in is the matzah meal. And we need 3/4 of a cup of matzah meal.
I'm gonna throw that in there for you.
Go for it. I'm gonna keep folding, Cheryl.
That's one. I'm improvising and using the edge of my knife to level this matzah.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
This recipe reminds me of a carrot kugel that I make for Thanksgiving. That goes over very well for Thanksgiving. The texture is a little different because the carrot kugel I use for Thanksgiving, I don't deal with the egg whites before. I just throw everything, in all together.
So does that one use flour? Thanksgiving, or is
That one uses a bit of flour.
Right.
Yeah, so that matzah meal is very heavy. And I've wondered, in the past, should I lessen the matzah meal? But instead of lessening the matzah meal, I do some other things to change this recipe up, which we'll get to in just a moment. Okay, next thing is the egg yolks, which are quite gloppy, but they add the thickness and the saturation that you need.
And a little vegetable oil.
1/2 cup, please.
And clearly, we're not using kosher for Passover products today, but of course we would be.
We will be when we make this again
In a
in
couple of weeks.
yes.
And the stores are all stocked with everything. I think they're starting to have
A little bit.
most of the stuff we need.
Okay. Now, can you take out your fancy juicer for a teaspoon of lemon juice, please?
I did my juicing.
See, Cheryl, we both have the gadgets. Cheryl likes to use them.
I do kind of like that.
Right, like I would just squeeze the lemon into a bowl. Cheryl's using her actual juicer.
Here's your teaspoon of lemon
She
juice.
is kind of fancy, and at least you could say you use it.
This one's pretty cute, and it
Cheryl,
goes
what
right in.
kind of juicer is that? Where can I
Yeah,
get?
so this is kind of cool. I don't know where I got it, but it's so many years old. But so it's this little device here, and has the juicing thing on top, and you stick your lemon on it, and put the top on and go back and forth, and it has a handy dandy spout to pour it out of. So
That's awesome.
kind of like it.
Actually, we do take a tremendous amount of cooking classes together. It's something we both love. We're both always doing the holidays. So remember like 20 years ago, the Thanksgiving one?
Oh, the
We
Thanksgiving.
didn't know how to make a turkey. And Aunt Linda's been making the turkey forever.
Well, you did a fabulous.
I
turkey
did this year. Thank you. 2 tablespoons of orange juice.
I'm just gonna show off my other juicer, by the way.
Oh, wow.
This one's awesome too.
I have one like that. That's cool.
Yeah, but how many gadgets can you have in your kitchen, you know?
Actually, there's never too many gadgets. I love it. So this next thing that we need to add, the recipe actually calls for pineapple with heavy syrup. You cannot find heavy syrup right now. I looked. I didn't look because I wanted to make it with heavy syrup. I was just trying to follow the recipe for today's cooking special. The truth is that if I can lighten up a recipe that has a cup of sugar, I will. So this is crushed pineapple in its own juice. Believe me, it's sweet enough. You don't need the pineapple in heavy syrup. You just pour the entire can right on in. You hand the can to your
Assistant.
sister-in-law and you continue to fold. It's that easy. And all we're gonna do is,
That looks delicious.
it smells nice too, right? It has a very citrusy smell.
I'm surprised this doesn't have cinnamon in it, actually.
Well, this does not, my carrot souffle for Thanksgiving
It
does.
looks like something that would
Yes.
offer cinnamon.
Yes. So we're going to take that Pyrex
Which would never be acceptable.
at the holiday table, right? We like to put on. We like to use our oven to table things.
You gotta break out the fancy stuff for the holidays. That looks great and nice and sweet to satisfy
the Graver Kshonz clan.
The Graver set.
Part of the, my mom likes everything sweet, my kids.
And my kids only want to know if there's meat on the table.
Right, it has to be.
It's like
worse.
meat and potatoes. That's it.
Okay,
Jen,
so this
Jen,
is
could
ready to
you-
go.
could you substitute the canned pineapple for a different fruit if someone had a pineapple allergy, like a peach?
1,000%. You
Or-
just want something sweet. Cheryl, can you please put that in the oven?
Gonna throw this one in the oven.
Yes, now that has to cook for 40 to 45 minutes. If you leave it for the 40, your eggs are cooked through, but I have to tell you, it has a texture of like a butternut squash souffle. So I suggest leaving it in for the 45 to give it a tiny bit of a crust. I'm going to show you, I cooked this last night. This is the recipe that we just did together, and this is what it would look like. For the holiday, I would be cutting figs, dates, cranberries, possibly toasting some nuts. I would be putting it all on top because I like a little extra for every single thing that I make.
Oh, really?
So I did want to show you how it comes out, the way the recipe, actually is called for, but on our holiday table, it will be a little fancier.
And it is in your beautiful dish. So,
Thank you, oven to table.
and I should mention that you're really the queen of advanced prep for everything, where I'm more of like I don't know how to make things in advance. So I'm like always crazy the day of the holiday and I'm up at the crack and making everything the day of. Jen's really, really good at preparing things in advance. So do you think this is one of those things that you could make
1,000%. So
and freeze or make a day before?
I don't know if I would freeze.
Right.
It doesn't have margarine. So if you have a lot of, I'm sorry, but crap in your kugels, they freeze better. And yes, when we do Thanksgiving, we're talking minimum 40 people.
Right.
So you can't possibly cook for 40 that day. Certain things, of course, fresh salads, fresh vegetables, crudité have to be cut then. But yes, there are foods that can be made in advance. And something like this, I would make probably 2 or 3 days in advance, and keep in the fridge. And when
Undercook it by.
I would undercook it, yes. So I would, if I were doing that, I would cook it. My trick that I always do when I'm hosting is I cook everything that it only needs 30 minutes left, so that nothing is burned, nothing is, so if a recipe calls for an hour, I cook it 30 minutes prior. If a recipe calls for 50 minutes, I cook it 20 minutes. That's how I am able to take every single thing out at the same time, because when our crowd comes, they like to eat. We have a bunch of eaters. And I know our segment was not on desserts. I must say the desserts in this book, written by Susie Fishbein, and she has many wonderful books. But the desserts in this book, the brownies, my kids ask for all year long. They are better than regular brownies. When Passover is coming to an end, I buy extra potato starch to get me through the year. They are just fudgy, delicious, and wonderful.
Her recipes are like
Fabulous.
literally no fail. Like anything in these books, I think
Her cheesecake.
the cheesecake is
My
amazing.
mother always requests the cheesecake, but even so, cheesecake, it's delicious.
It's really good. Yeah. So and her other books with the non-Pesach recipes are unbelievable. You don't have to like test the recipe out.
Correct.
If you're using this, it's like
They're no fail.
I feel like that about Ina Garten too, who's like one of my favorite chefs, but her recipes are like, you can make it, it's going to be great. So,
Right. Interesting.
But her stuff is good. And it's funny that at the end of Passover or during Passover, we all load up like to keep our favorite things during the year, like
Yes.
using the potato starch. And I and my family and my mother and I like love matzah farfal, and my brother actually. So we buy boxes and boxes of matzah farfal to get us through the year until the next Pesach comes, because it's hard to find. Usually
It's pretty hilarious.
it's so funny, and and matzah itself too. I mean, matzah brie is probably one of my favorite things.
Cheryl, what do you make with matzah farfal that you need boxes and boxes of it?
You're gonna think this is crazy, but I like it on my salad as like
The crunch.
it's like a
Like a
crunch.
crouton.
It's different than croutons for some reason, and because it absorbs, like when you dress your salads and it absorbs a little and it becomes like a little soft. I don't know. I use it all year. I throw it on my salads every single day.
That's really fun.
If I'm making myself a salad for lunch, I always use it. But my family likes it. I think like they use it in soups.
Great.
My mom makes like cabbage soup oftentimes and chicken soup all year, obviously, and they're big on putting matzah farfal in the soup. So I don't know. We keep a ton of it around, and we use it all the time. And matzah brie, I was saying I love during the year.
That's a popular one.
Love it. So I have to keep some boxes of matzah brie. It's great for also when you just have nothing to make for dinner, or you just don't want to make chicken again. Sometimes, my husband looks at me and he goes, matzah brie? I'm like, yes.
Beautiful. Jen, you want to show the book a little bit closer to the camera so everyone can see? And
Sure.
It's called Passover by Design by Susie Fishbein.
Again, all of her books, I have every single one. I mean,
We're not sponsored by her, but we're just
no. But
we're
I
just
feel like
tips.
I feel like we've been, cooking with her books. Oh, that one I use constantly.
This recipe was from one of hers.
Probably.
Right. Like this is another great one. I mean, we both have all.
We have the whole series. We do compare recipes sometimes in the morning when we meet in the driveway. We're like, what are you making for dinner? Oh, what am I making for dinner? That sort of thing.
I need a little spark, a little inspiration,
How much chicken can you make?
Yeah, it gets a little crazy.
Absolutely. Well, I want to
Yeah.
thank you ladies so much. Is there any other words of wisdom that you wish to bestow upon us today?
Well, I think that we say, enjoy the time with your family.
That's all that matters, actually.
So
Spring is coming, and when the family gathers, it's beautiful, and
right.
that's all that matters.
Yeah. So we wish everybody a happy, healthy holiday always. And honestly, we have so much fun being across the street from each other and doing all of our holidays together. And it's a joy that our entire families spend all of our holidays together, extended
Yes,
cousins,
we're very
aunts,
lucky.
uncles, and we're lucky that we all enjoy each other's company, and there's never been any kind of issue. So it's just, the holidays are happy times for us. And, we look forward to all of our kids coming back and hopefully being together and everybody coming in. So, I think that's all we can say. There's so much going on in the world.
Right.
You got to enjoy your family.
Right.
So.
Right.
Absolutely, 100%. I want to thank you ladies so much for
Thank
cooking with
you.
us today.
And have the most wonderful Passover holiday.
Thank you for inviting us
so
to do
much.
this.
Absolutely. Thank you for being our first guest chefs for this series. Our next actual chefs are also another sister duo. We will have Cheryl Bihar and Sherry Silver, who are going to be sharing some of their